Well, I'm here in front of the church, and I just want to kind of get out of my office, think about my sermon for Sunday, just as writers get writer's block. Believe it or not, preachers get preacher's block. So, and coming out here in the front of the church, believe it or not, these doors open to welcome people into our church. And so coming out here, I was hoping to kind of to think and to reflect, or maybe write some things down about my sermon for this Sunday. In our scripture text from Luke 7, Jesus is invited to a Pharisee's house for a dinner. At this dinner, no doubt people are gathering around a table and eating and talking, and after a while people can't but help notice this woman at Jesus' feet, and she, with her tears in her hair, actually starts to begin to wash or wipe Jesus' feet, and she actually uses costly perfume as well. Well, finally, probably this perfume just kind of wafted in the room, and people couldn't ignore this woman any longer. So finally, Simon, who's a Pharisee and whose house Jesus is having dinner at, finally he says, you know, if Jesus was a prophet, he would know this woman is from the city and she's a sinner. The implication being probably this woman is a prostitute, or somehow engages in some very public sinful acts. But Jesus kind of wants to turn the tables on Simon, and he tells Simon, since I've got here, you haven't done anything for me. You didn't embrace me, you didn't kiss me, you didn't anoint me with oil, all the things that are usually done to a guest in antiquity, Simon never did to Jesus. But Jesus finally turns to this woman and he says, you know, look, Simon, for those who forgive little, they love little. For those who forgive greatly, they love greatly. And he turns to this woman and he says to her, her sins are forgiven. Everyone begins to wonder, you know, who is this that can forgive sins? Only God forgives sins. I think a lot of Christians over the years have wanted to identify with this woman, and knowing that we're all sinful in some way, and we all have things that we've done that we want to be forgiven of. But I think as Christians we need to identify with Simon the Pharisee. The reason why we need to identify with him is because we, like Simon, have difficulty when we come in contact with people who have baggage. Poor, the oppressed, people who don't look right, people who we know are engaging in sinful acts. We don't know how to help them. We don't know how to minister to them. We don't want to be associated with them. We may invite them in some way, as Simon invited, or allowed this woman, I should say, into his home, but he didn't do anything for her. And so often we want to do something, but instead of seeing people, we see problems. And those problems prevent us from wanting to get involved. But as we see with this woman, Jesus sees her devotion and forgives her of her sins. We need to identify with Simon, because all of us are reluctant to engage people who we know need help. We don't know what to do. You know, Jesus, it's interesting, he didn't say the sinner's prayer with her, he didn't tell her about the 4 spiritual laws, he didn't do all these kind of Christian conversion things, but he spent time with her. He spent time with her so that she could come to know the love of God. I think that speaks to us that when we come in contact with people who we don't know how to minister to, we don't know what to say to them, we need to spend time with the poor. We need to spend time with those who are marginalized. We don't necessarily need to evangelize them right when we meet them, but we need to spend time with them, to learn about them, to know their story. So may you, as you encounter difficult people, people who are sinful, people who you don't know who to minister to, the poor, the marginalized, may you spend time with them like Jesus. May you spend time with them so much that maybe one day they'll come through the doors of this church. And maybe one day they'll come to Christ. Maybe one day they'll join with us in worship and song and Bible study. May you be someone who can convey God's forgiveness and God's love. May you spend time with those who need help. May you spend time with those who need God's forgiveness and God's love.